Okay, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to today's session. Welcome. Can you just tell me in the chat if you can hear me well, if the sound is good, please, just so I'm sure. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. All right. All right, good. So welcome. Good evening. I hope you're all well. We will continue our study of Nagarjuna's praises. Praises to Buddha nature. Praises to the Dharmadhatu. So it is very important, this text, as I explained last time. As we study this text, we will come to really explore what is this issue with obscurations, defilements. Why is it that we speak of sentient beings, suffering, confusion, and how is it that this Buddha nature abides, this element abides unseen, but is primordially present, primordially pure? And as we reflect upon that, and as we come to understand, it's like some shift can start to happen within us. And that in itself is one of the means, if you will, by which this purification of the Alaya Vijnana can occur. So last time we spoke about the Alaya Vijnana and the purification of the Alaya Vijnana. So, and as we will study these topics deeper, we will see, exactly how that means to purify the Alaya Vijnana. And of course, that's the path, right? But in particular, one of the aspects of purification of the Alaya Vijnana is listening to the Dharma, actually. Listening and reflecting upon the Dharma is one of the main aspects, in fact. Because it starts to clarify something that was not visible before, and it starts to shift our experience. So in any case, this is very important because, of course, all sentient beings want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. But as well, we always say sentient beings, they confuse the causes of suffering for the causes of happiness. And they keep engaging in behaviors, actions, attitudes that only cause more suffering and that keep them in bondage, in limitation. And we need to come to understand what that is and why. It's like opening the eyes and seeing for the first time, So continuing with the text, we are now in stanza 3. So in the textual outline, now we start the section A2, which is detailed explanations. So now these are detailed explanations about what? Detailed explanations about how the element abides at the time of sentient beings. So how the element abides at the time of sentient beings, or during the stage of sentient being, right? So how is that? So basically, in order to explain how is it that this primordially pure and luminous core, heart, it seems to be obscured at the time of sentient beings. So how is that possible? So Nagarjuna goes now into kind of quite detailed explanation about that, which is very important. And it does that mostly by means of examples, metaphors, to illustrate exactly from different aspects how is it that this Buddha nature seems to be obscured, and how is that obscuration happening also, right? So the first example, section 821, so it says how the Dharmadhatu does not appear and then appears like butter. So this is the example of butter and milk. And the point of this example is to show, like it says in the outline, is to show how is it that the element seems not to be visible, right? So at the time of being a sentient being, sentient beings will say, I don't know what is this Buddha nature. I don't know. I don't see anything. I don't see any Buddha nature, right? So it is not visible. But then it appears. But it is always there. And it's not created, right? So the Buddha nature is not created, is not developed. So how is that possible? So here Nagarjuna is using the example of butter. So stanza 3 says, as butter, though inherent in the milk, is mixed with it, and hence does not appear, just so the Dharmadhatu is not seen, as long as it is mixed together with afflictions. So, ordinary mind is also in the context of this example, that which we would call ordinary mind or just general mind. So, like this, the eight consciousnesses, in this sense, is like milk, in the sense that mind abiding, the mind abiding together with the defilements. So the mind together with the defilements is like the milk. So the butter is present within the milk. It's not like it's not there at all. It's not like the butter is something that is completely absent from milk. It permeates the milk, we can say. However, while it's mixed with I don't know what's the word, thistle milk, no, I forget the word, like the watery thing of the milk. While it's mixed with that, it's not visible. So in the same way, the Dharmadhatu, the Buddha nature, permeates the mind, in fact, and permeates the whole reality. But due to the afflictions, is not apparent. It is not visible. Just like if you have a jar of milk, you don't say, I have butter there. You say, there's milk. I don't see any butter there. But to really understand this example, we need to go to the next stanza, stanza 4. It's just introducing the point of the example. So stanza 4 then says, and just as the inherent butter essence, when the milk is purified, is no more disguised. When afflictions have been completely purified, the Dharmadhatu will be without any stain at all. So, in this example, basically it's saying that when the milk is churned, so they churn the milk, when the milk is churned, and the butter and the liquid substance starts to separate, right? And gradually, in the beginning they're just milk, and then if somebody is doing it in the traditional way, they use those long like containers, and then they use this pylon or something, and they pump it in, like this. So slowly you start to see some separation starting to happen. So in the same way, through the conditions that are provided by the path and the practice, the defilements are distinguished from the Dharmadhatu. And it appears, then we can say that it appears that the Dharmadhatu is purified of the defilements. But this doesn't mean, obviously, it doesn't mean that this Buddhahood. Thank you. Wei, that's it. Wei, the liquid. Yeah, wei, that's it. Thank you. Somebody in the comments just said wei. Yeah. So when the whey and the fatty butter starts to separate, right, as you churn the milk, and then it gradually starts to separate, and at some point you just have this lump, this lump which we call the butter, and then you have the liquid, like the very thin liquid called the whey. Now they're separated. So in the same way, through the practice of the path, the defilements are separated from it appears that they are separated from the Dharmadhatu. And in that sense, it appears that the Dharmadhatu is purified. But this doesn't mean that Buddhahood is appearing as the result of the path in terms of producing a cause, or that Buddhahood is produced as something new. It's not like that Buddhahood is the result of a development, of a production of something. Just like when you churn the milk, the churning, this is quite subtle, but it's quite interesting. Let's think about it. It's like churning the milk. When churning the milk, the churning of the milk does not produce butter as making it from something that was not there. If the butter was not already present in the milk, you could not make it. Because when you are churning the milk, when people is churning the milk, they're not adding anything to it. They're not putting in anything that's not already there. Right? So there's nothing new created that is not already there. So you cannot say that the churning of the milk produces the butter, even though the butter appears. Right? It's exactly like this. So just like the churning of the milk does not produce butter. However, we can even understand this in a deeper way. So a more profound way to understand this is if we now look at the four extremes of production. This is actually so important. This example is so good and it's so important. So if you remember when we studied the Sword of Wisdom, we studied, the four great arguments of the middle way, right? And we studied this refutation of production, right? We studied this, how to establish that production is empty of true existence. Production cannot be made from self, from other, both or neither, if you remember, right? So if we now go back to that, and if we think about production, how something is produced, so it's like this. It's the same way. It's the same way. So if we think of Buddhahood in terms of result, we now can apply these four arguments of production. So in that sense, we can say that through the path, through the practice of the path, Buddhahood manifests. Buddhahood appears. Just like the butter appears from churning the milk. However, this does not mean that Buddhahood arises from itself, from other, from both, or without a cause. Do you understand what I'm doing here? Do you understand? So we're applying these four arguments of production that we studied. And if you don't remember this very well, afterwards you can go and review that. I mean, it's there, everything is there, right? You can go and review that in the text of the argument of the middle way. You can review this reasoning of the emptiness of production. If something is produced, how is it produced? Is it produced from itself? Is it produced from something else? From both or neither? And so in the conclusion, of course, after we follow this reasoning, is that this Madhyamika reasoning, is the conclusion is that something is not produced from itself, is not produced from other, is not produced from both, and is also not produced without a cause. So Buddhahood is exactly the same way. Is not produced from itself, is not produced from something else other than itself, is not produced from both, and is not and it does not come about without a cause. It is empty of true existence. It's like this. Exactly. You can apply this for the four reasonings of production in the same way. So the implication then, of course, is that Buddhahood itself is empty of true nature, obviously, right? It is also unproduced, uncreated, unceasing, beyond extremes. Do you get the implications here? The implication is here. If you really reflect upon this, it's incredible. Because we started in the beginning by saying, this is just quite incredible. I'm just smiling because it's so profound, it's so beautiful. We started in the beginning by saying that the Buddha nature, the element, is primordially present, primordially pure. But then we started by saying that sentient beings are not Buddhas, right? So the element is always present, always pure. But sentient beings are not Buddhas. But so how is it possible? And I will use the example of the milk and the churning of the milk. But then we apply these four arguments of production to this process, right, of the churning of the milk, or the process of purifying the alaya vijnana, right, which is the example here. So this to do the path of purifying the alaya vijnana, and it seems like Buddhahood appears, but how is that produced? And then we apply the four arguments of production, and we come to the conclusion that it's not produced from itself, from other, neither, or without a cause. It's empty of true existence, which means that it is unproduced, uncreated, and unceasing. So it's always there. So we come back to the beginning, and yet it appears like this. Do you understand? So in other words, to kind of similar, just because Buddhahood seems to appear as the result of the practicing of the path, so it seems that Buddhahood appears as the result of practicing the path and clearing the defilements. That is how it appears. However, that does not mean that something new is being produced. It doesn't mean that something that was not there already is being produced, just like the butter from the milk. So, in this case, as I just said, if we analyze in terms of the four types of production, we say conventionally that it's produced, but when we do that, we conclude that Buddhahood does not arise from itself, from other than itself, from both, or without a cause, so it is beyond the four extremes, beyond the arising, abiding, and ceasing. There's a question there. I struggle with the last argument. If it's unproduced, how it can be produced without a cause? No, but that's what I said, right? So the argument of the four productions, it's not produced from itself, it's not produced from something else, is not produced from both itself and something else, but it's also not produced without a cause, right? That's the conclusion of the analysis of the four modes of production, right? That's what we said before. Do you understand? It's not without a cause. That's the point. That's why so if we have the milk, again, the milk and the butter, it's just not produced. That's exactly, it's just not produced. It's just like the butter, when we have the milk, we don't see butter there. There's no butter. We say there's no butter, there's milk. Nobody looks at the pot of milk and say there's butter there. Nobody says that, right? It's not butter, it's milk. But then when you churn the milk, then the butter appears. But the butter is not produced. It's not something, it's not something new, newly arising from somewhere else, different from the essence of what's already there. So it's unproduced in that sense. It appears to appear due to due to the it appears to appear it appears due to the churning of the milk, and yet is not something other than the milk. Okay, so I think, of course, it's a metaphor to exemplify how it seems that the path produces Buddhahood. So it seems like that. It seems like by practicing the path, Buddhahood appears. Just like through churning the milk, it seems that something new appeared, that is the butter, even though the butter was always there. Okay? So that's the example, that's the first example, how the element abides at the time of a sentient being in relation to the path. How, or better said, how is it that the element is there and is not visible, but then it appears, in sentient beings. So that's the example. Because this is quite extraordinary, you see, because again, Nagarjuna will explain through different examples that Buddhahood is not something that is developed, it is not something that is produced, it's already there. But just because it's already there, it doesn't mean you don't need a path. And I think that relates to one of the questions we had in the last session about, so if it's already there, what's the problem if someone is nihilist, or if the problem is, what's the problem if Buddhahood is always there, then what's the problem with anything, right? So I hope these examples can clarify those kind of confusions. Okay, then the next example, 822. How is it at the stages of sentient beings, path and result? The example of a lamp. So now the next example is the example of a lamp. And this example is to explain the Buddha nature in terms of how is this element in terms of the stages of sentient beings, path and result, in one example. And for that is the example of a lamp. So the stanza 5, it says, stanza 5 says, as a butter lamp that burns inside a vase would not even be slightly visible, as long as left inside affliction's vase, the Dharmadhatu is not visible. So I think there's 3 stanzas, yeah. So this example is 3 stanzas. Let's see if we can do that today. So how is this element, this Buddha nature, at time of the sentient beings in terms of the ignorant state, past state, and result state? So, as a butter lamp that burns inside a vase would not be even slightly visible. So the example here is if you would have a lamp like a candle, for example, a candle that is inside a vase, like a opaque vase, right? A pot or something like this, something that is opaque. So if the candle is inside something that is opaque, someone from the outside does not see the light, cannot see the lamp. Right? That's the point here, right? So if the lamp is inside the vase, it's not visible from the outside. So the vase here, the vase is the metaphor for the afflictions. And the lamp, of course, is the metaphor for the Dharmadhatu, for the Buddha nature. So this verse basically is explaining the way that sentient beings are unaware and in confusion, by using this example. So just like there's lamp or a candle that is inside this container and cannot be seen. So even though the lamp is inside this container and cannot be seen, the luminous nature of the light is still present. It is ever present. Just because I can't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. So the lamp is covered by the container, but the light's still there. The light's still there. So the Dharmadhatu here, of course, which refers to what? Refers to our true nature. And now we can start to be a little bit more specific about this. So the Dharmadhatu here, which is referring to the true nature, we can also say that it refers to the two wisdoms. So when we speak of wisdom in the Dharma, we can speak of wisdom in several terms or several categories, depending on the context. And there are several ways to speak about wisdom, different aspects of wisdom, if you will. But in this particular context, we will speak of the two wisdoms, which is the wisdom of suchness and the wisdom of manyness. And the two wisdoms, the wisdom of suchness and the wisdom of manyness. So the wisdom that knows, this aspect of wisdom that knows the true nature of phenomena as emptiness, is the wisdom of suchness. And the wisdom that knows the true nature of phenomena as is in its infinite manifested variety and display and permeating all manifestation, that's called the wisdom of manyness. So when we speak of the Buddha nature, we are also talking about these two aspects of wisdom, because that's actually because Buddha nature, again, as I said last session, Buddha nature is not nothingness, right? So when we start to qualify more specifically this Buddha nature, then we have to qualify wisdom and qualities, which we will go later, but wisdom. So the wisdom aspect of this Buddha nature, which is these two, wisdom of suchness and wisdom of manyness. The wisdom that knows the true nature of emptiness, and the wisdom that knows the true nature of the manifest infinity display. There's a question. No, it's the comment. Okay. So, right, so these two wisdoms. So the Dharmadhatu, as I just said, is not just mere emptiness, right? So we really talked a lot about that, I think, on the last session. But it is emptiness, suchness, and it is inseparable from this luminous nature. And not just this luminous nature, but when we speak of luminous nature, we're also talking about these natural and spontaneous qualities, the natural intrinsic qualities of this luminous nature, which we will detail a bit further later down. So when we speak about these natural and spontaneous qualities, this can be understood in terms of three aspects: of cause, fruition, and abandonment. Cause, fruition, and abandonment. So what does that mean? So cause, fruition, and abandonment. Okay, so the Dharmadhatu is the cause. Why? Because it is the natural and spontaneous abiding condition. So because the Dharmadhatu itself is the natural, spontaneous, abiding, natural condition, and because of that we call it the cause. But it's also the fruit. Why? It is the fruit because, or the result, because that's what we mean by Buddhahood, with all the qualities of enlightenment. So that which we call the result of the path which is Buddhahood, together with all the qualities of enlightenment, is also the Dharmadhatu. So from that perspective, it is the result. So I said there's three aspects, right, to the Dharmadhatu: as a cause, as a result, and abandonment, right? This is quite important to understand. All these examples is quite important. So it is the Dharmadhatu is the cause because it's the abiding condition. It is the result because it's the Buddhahood itself is that. And it is abandonment. Why? Because in relation to that which is purified in the path, so when we speak about what is purified in the path, or what is abandoned in the path, so in relation to that which is purified through the path, it is that which is present once all these illusory defilements and obscurations are released. That is what is naturally present. So it is naturally peace, right? So that's the aspect of abandonment. So when all the defilements are abandoned, what is left is the Dharmadhatu. Okay, so in that regard, we speak of Dharmadhatu in these three aspects: cause, fruit, and abandonment. I'll repeat again. It is the cause because it is the natural abiding condition. It is the result because what we call Buddhahood is that itself. And it is abandonment because once all the defilements are purified, abandoned, that which remains is the Dharmadhatu. So we can look at the Dharmadhatu from these three aspects. And that's how we can speak of sentient beings and the path and the result. Okay. Somebody had a comment I found very interesting. This example, I found it okay. I don't know what you mean by that, but okay. If you have some other thing to comment, you can say. So we're in the second stanza. So as a butter lamp that burns inside a vase would not even be slightly visible. There's a question. Doesn't that contradict the refutation of production from itself? No, because we're not saying it's produced. We're saying that is when the defilement, no. Production from itself would imply that there's something new produced, different or something like this. We're not saying this. We're saying that it is the cause because it's the natural abiding condition. This is what's there. And when the temporary defilements are purified, abandoned, what remains is that itself. There's no production at all. Do you understand? So, as the butter lamp that burns inside a vase would not even be slightly visible. As long as left inside the affliction's vase, the Dharmadhatu is not visible. Okay, so where was I? So the meaning of this second stanza, the meaning of the second part of the stanza is that the defilements. So these defilements, which are here, the metaphor is the vase. These defilements, such for example as, and we will qualify that a little bit more in a moment. So the defilement, something like ignorance, ignorance, pride, jealousy, and so on. These are like the vase. These are like the vase that obscure the natural luminous quality of the lamp. But the natural luminous quality of the lamp is always there. It's not produced. If I break the vase, you see, that's the thing. There's no production happening. There's no contradiction here. There's no light. It's dark. The lamp is burning there. If I break the vase, I can say, conventionally speaking, I could say, I made light. I made light, I produced light. But no, I didn't produce light. The light was already there. It seems that now light appears. Okay. There's no production at all. So once this vase is removed, it seems that the light is produced. But that's not true. It appears to be, but it's not really what happened. Because that light that now appears is no other than the same light that was always there. So all these three aspects, so that the question that was just asked, that if this doesn't contradict the production from itself. So all these three aspects I just explained of cause, result, and abandonment, there's no contradiction, because these three aspects are in reality the same thing. They are just the same thing at three times, three stages, if you will, right? Like this. So using the example of the lamp, the cause, in terms of cause, we can say that the light, the candle flame, the candle light that is inside the vase is the cause. Okay? And if I remove the vase, now there's light everywhere. And now I say that the candle, now I say that the light is the result. Okay? You get the example. And in terms of abandonment, the removal of the vase is the abandonment. And what is left with this abandonment is the light of the candle. And in all these three, it's always the same light. From one perspective, it looks like the light is the cause for the later illumination. So if you have a dark room, and you have this light covered. So from that, and then you remove the cover, and now there's illumination in the room. And so from that perspective, you can say that the light in the candle is the cause for the later illumination. Okay? And from the perspective of the illumination, you can say that the light of the candle is the result, is the illumination. And from the perspective of abandonment, you can say that the removal of the vase is the abandonment that causes the illumination. But in these three, there's nothing different on that light. It's always the same light. This is actually quite easy it's easy, but it's quite subtle and it's quite profound. It's really, this example is fantastic. It's really good. It's really important to reflect upon it. This is Buddha nature is like this, same way. So what are these obscurations now? Okay. So what is this vase? What is this container that is blocking the light, blocking this lamp? So when we speak of obscurations and defilements, there's really many different ways to explain these and many different categorizations. And if we study in more detail the abandonments, what is purified along the stages of the path, this can be classified into really dozens, even you can classify it in up to 90 or 100, things like this. If we go really in detail, what is abandoned in each aspect of the Four Noble Truths, each stage of the path, it gets really refined, all the different kinds of defilements and obscurations, very subtle, that are purified as you go along the path. But that's not for now. Now just general explanation. So general explanation, what are these obscurations that we're talking about? So the most general way to talk about obscurations is into two kinds, that which we would call cognitive and emotional. So cognitive obscurations and emotional obscurations. All the obscurations generally we speak would be part of these two groups, either cognitive or emotional obscurations. So, for example, when we can speak of obscurations in general sense, also like ignorance, pride, aversion, attachment, jealousy. Also, that's spoken as the defilements. However, I think in this case we should look at the defilements. Maybe it's useful to look at the defilements as the general presentation of the defilements, the way they are presented in the Abhidharma. And here we would speak of, I think five wrong views: desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. Five wrong views. Yeah, 10. So there's 10. 10 defilements. So this would be like the most sort of common view of the defilements that will be explained in all the paths and all the yanas and the Mahayana in detail. So the 10 defilements. So what are the 10 defilements? Is the defilements of views, desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. Views, desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. Now, this is not 10, I know, but there's several views. So when I say that this defilement of views, this includes several, which I will explain briefly in a moment. So there's several views, which is wrong views, and then there's desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. So in particular, the affliction that is called views refers to several things, or we would say several wrong views, which are, for example, the belief in a truly existing self as permanent and an autonomous entity. That would be one of them, right? One of the wrong views. So the perspective, the view, and again, remember that this is not a conceptual thing, okay? This is not a conceptual thing that we're talking about here. There is the conceptualization of something as being a truly existing entity, but that's not really what this means here. This is more subtle. It's the perception, the actual perception of something as being a truly existing self, and permanent and autonomous entity. That's one of them. And then it also refers to extremist views, such as, for example, the view that there is a permanent entity, like a soul, the existence of a permanent soul. That's another one of these wrong views, that belongs to the views. Another one would be nihilism, the view of nihilism, the view that there's really no cause and effect, no karma, no past lives, no future lives, everything is nothingness or something. Whatever, there's many variations of nihilism, there's many categories of nihilism. So all these kind of nihilistic views would be also categorized here as one of these views. Defilement, it's defilement, okay? It's considered a defilement. It also, so there's also the view of the rejection of cause and effect, causality, karma. That's also one of the wrong views. Then there's also the wrong view of self-inflation or conceit. This like a kind of subtle type of arrogance of me. This inflated sense of self that everybody has. Some people have it manifested more openly than others, but everybody has it. It's one of these natural afflictions that everybody has. That's why I'm more. That's why I'm the center of the world, right? I mean, everybody is the center of the world. You know, just some people take it more. Some people take it more seriously than others, but everybody is the center of the world. So, like that. So these views, this defilement of views, cover several of these type of perceptions. Like this. This is one of the defilements. There's another one. There's another view, which is the viewed or the wrong view of overstating asceticism. So the view of overstating asceticism, so that's actually also one of the 5 wrong views. So some people may have the idea that in order to purify the mind, to attain spiritual enlightenment, I must go into extreme asceticism and self-mortify the body, self-mortify the mind to extreme points, and that extreme asceticism, the extreme mortification, that is virtuous. That is one of these 5 wrong views. That's a defilement also, right? So there's these 5 ones. That's called the 5 wrong views. Somebody asked, how is it different that the belief in a truly existing self to conceive self-inflation? It is a little bit different. It's a different aspect. The belief in the belief in self existence is the perception that entities, and this is not just about you, okay? This is about all phenomena. It is the belief that entities are permanent entities. They are permanent, autonomous, self-existing, having their own essence entities. The perception of that. That's one. And the other one is self-conceit. This self is the center of the world. Does that help? Slightly different aspect. So those are the 5 views, that are defilements. And then the other ones are easy to understand, right? So desire is easy to understand. Anger is easy to understand. Pride, easy to understand. Ignorance we need to explore a bit deeper, because you may think that, okay, so I'm anticipating a question. So how is ignorance different from these 5 wrong views that I just explained? No, it's a little bit different. I will explain that maybe a little bit later. Because ignorance refers to several other things. Ignorance, in this context of the defilements, ignorance means several things, actually, and we can later study that in more detail. But for example, ignorance in this context means, for example, ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. It means ignorance in relation to the nature of existence. It can mean ignorance regarding to the nature of our own mind. Now, for example, ignorance in relation to the Four Noble Truths, right? So we say the nature of samsaric existence is insatisfaction or dissatisfaction, or suffering, if you want to be a bit more classical about it. But you don't really know that, you know. People don't really know that. Sentient beings don't really know that. They are ignorant in relation to that. See, for example, we can explain the Four Noble Truths, and we can explain the nature of samsaric existence is dissatisfaction, or lack of permanent happiness, or suffering, depending how far you want to go. And we can explain why. We can go into great detail explaining why. And the person can even intellectually understand why. That, yeah, it's like this. There's no permanent satisfaction to be found in samsaric existence, and so on and so on. You can get to a kind of intellectual understanding of the First Noble Truth, for example. But you don't really know. So that's this ignorance. Because if you really knew the First Noble Truth, you just let go. You just let go, or the second Noble Truth, the cause, right? The second Noble Truth. What is the cause of samsara? So the cause of samsara, the first explanation would say it's desire. But of course, ultimately, the cause of samsara is ignorance about the true nature of existence. And again, we can explain that, and people can understand the suffering that is caused by desire and so on, and the problem of ignorance and so on, but don't really know. Don't really know. If knew, free. So that's the ignorance, because we can understand the Four Noble Truths intellectually, but there's still ignorance about them. And in fact, when we speak about the five paths from the Mahayana perspective, so we speak about the path of accumulation, the path of junction, and then when the practitioner reaches the threshold of actually leaving samsara to becoming a holy being, an Arya, so they enter the path of seeing, called the first bhumi, the first stage of the path of cultivation. So, right, this first bhumi, this first stage, the path of seeing, which is the moment where the practitioner, for the first time, as a direct, non-conceptual cognition of nature, of emptiness, complete. So that's called the path of seeing. If we study this in great detail in the sutras, you will see in the text it explains that the moment the practitioner reaches this stage, as they enter this realization, this total realization of the non-conceptual nature of emptiness, it's marked by the step-by-step 16 moments of realization of the Four Noble Truths. So that's actually the first time where the practitioner actually realizes the Four Noble Truths, right? Really realizes the Four Noble Truths, is at the same time when they enter the path of seeing, when they have the realization of the total direct realization of it. Only then they actually realize the Four Noble Truths. Until then, it's just some kind of approximation. It's not really yet. So that's ignorance. Huh? So, for example, that's one of the meanings of ignorance in this context. So not knowing the Four Noble Truths is one of these defilements. It's a very important one, in fact. Right? So there's many different examples. Okay, so just a brief explanation of what is this vase, what is this container that is veiling this Buddha nature. Then, stanza 6, if one perforates the surface of the vase, whatever holes are made in whichever directions, through those and in precisely those directions, light will shine, as is its nature too. That's very nice. So, if one perforates the vase, like not breaking it yet, like, right? So if you want to make holes in the vase, with whatever holes are made in whichever directions, through those and precisely those and in those directions, light will shine. So now we're talking about the path. So I remember, as I explained in the beginning, in this example, Nagarjuna is talking about sentient being, path, and result. So he's using this example of the vase to illustrate the Dharmadhatu, the Buddha nature, at the three stages of sentient being, path, and result. So now the first example of the vase, of the lamp inside the vase, is like sentient being. A sentient being, a normal human being, a normal sentient being, is like that. It's like the lamp inside the vase. Then this now stanza 6 is about the path. So now we are elaborating on the path. And also it's explaining why does it seem like we need the path? Or what is the meaning of the path, if you will. Can also say like this. So the example basically saying that if we now make some holes in this container, if we make some holes in this vase, then beams of light will shine through. You can even visualize it, right? A dark room, you make a hole in the vase, a light beam comes out like this, right? And now, depending on the size of the holes, if they're like a very small hole or a very big hole, so depending on the size of the holes and depending where they are placed, where the holes are made, some light comes out. Can be a little light, can be a big beam of light. So in this way, the practitioners on the path, they seem to experience, and now this is the thing of the example, practitioners of the path, or during the path, practitioners seem to experience a progression or a development of their qualities and their realization. So this is where sometimes people get confused with, but so we speak of progression, we speak of a progress. Myself, I say that a lot, and when we read that in text, to develop, you need to practice so you can develop. You need to practice properly so you can develop properly, right? We speak like this, but then we also say, Buddha nature is perfect, all the qualities are perfect, and people can become a little bit confused. So this example is really good, and it's really important, because that's how it seems to be, right? So because of these holes, and now these light beams appear, and that's the metaphor for how it seems like we're experiencing progression on the path. It seems like some realization appears or develops. Some spiritual qualities, some qualities can start to appear. So if we don't understand this, then we may think that the path is producing these qualities and realizations. You may think that, I'm practicing this path, and because of that, there is a result manifesting like this, as a product, as a cause and result, as a production and result like this. But that's not the case. That's not what's happening. That this example is really elegant, actually. So, and because of that, in this way, there are several ways we can define the different kind of stages of the path. So when we speak of the path, normally the path is explained in terms of abandonments, qualities, and realizations. Means that, so abandonments, qualities, and realizations means like abandonments means which kinds of defilements are abandoned. Like we can say, for example, that in a certain stage of the path, anger is abandoned. So when a practitioner reaches a certain point of the path, they are free from anger. They no longer have anger. It's gone, permanently gone. Anger is abandoned, for example, or desire, for example, right? So abandonments. Which stages of the path these defilements are abandoned, and then they're qualified. It can be quite detailed. Like we can have gross anger and subtle anger. At some point of the path, gross anger is purified, is abandoned. There's no more gross anger. The practitioner no longer gets angry in an ordinary, gross way. But there's still subtle anger. There's a subtle aversion. There is a much more subtle form, and it's still there. And that's abandoned at the later stage of the path, for example, right? So this is abandonment. And then we speak of realizations, or qualities. Which is kind of some qualities that manifest during the path. And then there's realizations, things that are realized about nature of reality and being. So normally when we speak of the stages of the path, they are qualified by these three aspects: what is abandoned, what is what qualities manifest, and what is realized. This is not the topic of this text, so I'm not going to go into that now. Another time, if we study more in detail, like the Mahayana path, I will explain those things, because this is quite detailed explained. Each stage, what is abandoned, what is realized, what is, and so on. All that is very well described. But now just introduction to, like this. So that's how it seems like that there's this progression. This sense of progression, this sense of some realizations that increase and some qualities that develop, is just like this. It's like making holes in the pot, you know. There's nothing newly made. It's always the same light, you know. But now you make a little hole and a little light appears. Oh, whoa, look at that. You know, I've realized that, you know. And then you keep practicing and you make another hole. Another beam of light appears. Oh, look, I've discovered something else, you know. And there's this feeling of progression. But in reality, it's always just the same light. There's nothing else, okay? And it doesn't come from anywhere else. There's nothing produced. There's nothing developing. But it appears that there is, right? So that's the explanation of how it goes through the stages of the path. And we'll do the stanza 7 and then I finish. So stanza 7 then is about the result. So stanza 7 says, at the moment of the Vajra-like samadhi, at the moment when the Vajra-like samadhi is able to obliterate the vase, at that very moment, the light burning inside will shine through the reaches of all space. So now that's like the result, right? That's like the result. So at the end of the path, towards the end of the path, which would then correspond to total awakening, you know, Buddhahood, that is like totally destroying this vase, totally breaking this vase, getting rid of it completely. And the destruction of this vase is done through that which is called the Vajra-like samadhi. That's what Nagarjuna is saying there, you know. At the moment when the Vajra-like samadhi obliterates the base. So this Vajra-like samadhi, you find reference to that in many sutras, particularly in the Prajnaparamita sutras, you find it also a lot. This Vajra-like samadhi is the samadhi that is practiced, or is the samadhi that bodhisattvas apply at the end of the path. So a bodhisattva that is really at the end of the path, they will apply this, they will practice this. Or practice is maybe not the right, practice is not really the right word, but they will apply this, they will enter this Vajra-like samadhi. So at this point, all the karmic formations, all the karmic seeds, all the emotional obscurations, cognitive obscurations, they are totally eliminated without any residue, no trace left. So all the karmic latent tendencies, the alaya vijnana itself, you know, gone. And that is the point, is like the vase is completely destroyed. And then there's just this illumination, this complete illumination. The light of that lamp shines freely throughout all of space. And that would be like, in this context of the alaya vijnana that we spoke about last time, that's where in these kind of traditions they speak of like the transformation or the turning of the alaya vijnana. The turning of the alaya vijnana into alaya jnana, or like a wisdom. So the alaya vijnana becomes wisdom. However, the use of this word is just an example, because as I explained before, there is really nothing transformed, you know, it just appears that it's transformed, because the actual nature of this alaya vijnana is this pure luminous mind, and that is what remains, like the lamp after the vase is broken. And in this process, the light was always the same. Okay, this example is very profound. Reflect upon it. You know, the beginning, the stages, how making the holes in the vase, it looks like there's progress happening. You know, oh, I'm progressing, but there's nothing being made. This light that shines through the hole, which is some glimpse of realization, some glimpse of primordial awareness, some glimpse of realization of true nature, or whatever it is already the Buddha nature itself. You know, is no different than that. It's just not completely seen yet because it's only like through a hole. That's the example. Until the whole vase is broken, but it's already the same. There's no other new thing to be made. Yeah. And then you return to the vase. That's what I meant before. Then you return to the vase. Why do you return to the vase? I don't understand. The vase is broken. You're gonna glue it back together? Why? Oh no. Don't bring Dzogchen terminology to here. You're confusing things. We're teaching. We're in the realm of Mahayana right now. That's a different thing. That vase is different vase. No, don't confuse the vases, please. Don't confuse the vases, please. Different vase. Any more questions? No hammer. Yes, the hammer. The hammer is the path. The path is the hammer. That's what I meant. I only knew that one. Okay, no, but don't confuse that. This useful vase body that you're talking about, that is from Dzogchen system, and it's something that it's different context, different explanation, different purpose. Let's not mix things. This vase here is the defilements. Okay, it's different. It's really unrelated thing. Any more questions? No? No questions? If there's no questions, we finished today. What was Nagarjuna's main practice? What was Nagarjuna's main practice? I have no idea. Maybe you can read his hagiography. Maybe it says something there. I don't know. I actually don't know. I read it a long time ago. I don't remember if it even says there. I actually don't know. Anything else? Yeah, the life stories. Yeah, if you can find the hagiography, it's very, very, interesting to read. It's always inspiring to read. It's always inspiring to read the hagiographies of the saints, the great masters of the past. It's very, very nice. If you can find it, it's good. I agree. It's a very nice story. The most vivid memory I have is of the kusha grass cutting his head. You can only kill me with the grass. Nagarjuna is a very old figure in Buddhist tradition, right? So 2nd century. So there's a lot of stories. Anything else? Last call. If nothing else, okay. Right. So I guess we finish for today. We continue on. If you have any questions, you can bring them on Thursday. So we continue on Thursday again with the text. So have a good evening and good day, and I see you next time.